Folks, welcome to our Wednesday prayer video, and it's great to be here, or not here, but in Japan with John and Burita. If only I were, that would be great. It's just fabulous to have John and Burita. No Jonas, he's in bed.
Yeah, I'm afraid he's sleeping at the moment, but that's not a bad thing, trust me.
I'm sure that's great. Give him a big wave from us when you see him. We've seen some beautiful pictures of you guys on holiday and other things, and Jonas growing up. That's fabulous. So folks will probably know that John and Burita Timothy are in Japan with OMF in Hirosaki. And they've got little Jonas, who's, I want to say, a year and a half.
Yeah, year and a half, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then second child on the way in December.
That's right, 20th of December.
20th of December, Christmas baby. We're excited. But listen, what maybe I'd love you to do to start with is just take us up to. So at the moment you're in Hirosaki in Japan. I'll maybe try and put a map on the screen so people can see where that is. Japanese geography is not super, well, mine's not. Tell us a little bit, because that's you've been in Japan longer than a few months. Tell us about you getting to Japan with OMF and what you've been doing there, and what took you to Hirosaki. What's brought you up to this point so far?
Okay, do you want to start?
Go for it.
Okay. Yeah, so we've been in Japan for a total of 2.5 years now. And we arrived in Hirosaki 6 months ago, roughly. So that was after 2 years of language study. So OMF, before you go into a full-time ministry role, is to have sort of a 2-year language studying period. So after that language studying period, you're put on a placement for 2 years, where you're either put with a Japanese pastor as a mentor, or you're put into like a missionary sort of team, doing church planting or other things. So we've been put into a church planting team in Hirosaki, which is, for those of you who don't know the map of Japan, Hirosaki is in a prefecture called Aomori, which is below the northernmost island of Hokkaido. It's quite, how should we say?
Rural.
It's rural, yeah. So like your idea of Japan, it's not like flashing lights and like big skyscrapers. Yeah, it's very rural. People speak here with an incredibly strong accent, and it's not just accent; it's a lot of words. So people that we've talked to, so Japanese people who have moved here. One thing with a lady who moved here 6 years ago still can't understand the dialect.
She's Japanese.
And she's Japanese. So we have completely given up on trying to understand it. So thankfully, it's mostly the old people who speak it. And the young people can speak sort of both. They can speak normal Japanese, which is great. So yeah, we've joined a church plant here. So there's the 2 other senior missionaries, a couple from America and Canada, who are our leaders, and we work together in a church called Nozomi Christ Church. Nozomi means hope. So we've been working there, and they've been in Japan for like 30 years-ish. So they're a very experienced couple. Yeah, that's what we've come into since our language training.
Great. So 2 years of language training. You've been in Hirosaki 6 months. And I'm sure that the 2 years of language training was already quite a change in language and culture, let alone the jump from that to, as you say, Hirosaki is a place in and of itself. With how's that been in terms of a cultural jump, and how's that been in terms of getting used to the way you work differently in a different culture?
Yeah, I think I think the system that OMF has is really helpful in the way that we start in Sapporo, where there's quite a big presence of other OMFers and other missionaries.
Yeah.
And we're in this language center where we're quite protective, would you say? Like in terms of, we get taught a lot about culture. We have cultural classes every week we had, and language. I mean, the language setup is great, but of course, so in that way, it's been, I think for both of us, it has been a very good experience. Like, we loved our time in Sapporo, and it was very helpful. But of course, it is a massive change. I mean, just to go back to not understand, going to do your shopping. I mean, just a normal basic thing, and wanting to get flour, and you stand there and you can't. You know, I went home with potato starch.
Okay.
And I wanted icing sugar, for example, because I mean, you can't read anything.
It looks white,
and
so
it
it's
looks
the same.
white, and it kind of feels the same. You know, so I mean, just to the smallest details, there's a lot of just language-wise, there's a lot of barriers and things that make it, yeah, quite interesting. And yeah, and I think it's very gradual learning. I mean, we had 2 years of learning, which is great, but we still have such a long way to go.
I'm sure in many ways it can be very hard. At the same time, I come with such admiration for you guys for the time you spent absorbing that and giving yourselves to that, and there working for the kingdom in such a different culture with those hurdles to kind of get through. Great admiration and support for you in that. So now you're in Hirosaki, and you're in a church plant, and you're speaking Japanese every day and getting on with life in Japan. You're preaching in Japanese, but we've been praying for that. I know it's happened a few times, John, and we've been praying. But tell us, what does life look like on a? What does life look like as part of a church plant? There, is there a typical week, or what are the sorts of things you're both involved with?
I think every church plant is different depending on the people who are leading it. So the people who sort of, do different strategies and whatnot. Our church plant is quite strongly based on bringing people into the church through holding English lessons and events. So we have English classes on throughout the week. And all of our English classes, you sort of have an English time, and then also we always have like a Bible message in Japanese at the end, and so that takes up a lot of our time actually. And because they're geared at sort of all age groups, like children, teenagers, old people, middle-aged people, they all come at different times of the day according to their different schedules, school or work or whatever. So our week is very sort of it's there's bits and pieces of things everywhere. Class here at 8 o'clock and class at 5 o'clock, and so it's hard to sort of describe a normal week. It's just a big blur of things.
Classes.
Yeah.
The main things are, I mean, if you say you have 3 full days of English classes, so English classes spread out through the day from morning to evening.
Right.
And then we would have one day where we have more, so I have a Pilates class at church that I go to and I do a message for, and then we have a staff meeting and a few other bits and pieces. And then one day a week we are at a Christian camp center an hour away, and where it's more physical work, kind of, so that's kind of, and then if you think about that, then you have the Bible studies. So our church plant is very much, we focus on a lot of individual Bible studies, not groups, where some people will do more of a reading
the Bible with people.
So we have those as well, and then we have English cafe for students once a week on Friday, and then on Saturdays. So from all of those things that go on throughout the week, the purpose is to make contacts, and then on Saturdays have big events where we then share the gospel again. And those events have been very popular, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very, like, Hirosaki is a very small community. Well, it's small. It's like, what, 100 and something thousand people. Yeah. But in Japanese standards, it's very small. So like stuff like that sort of spreads by word of mouth. So the church has quite a reputation among a lot of different people, a good reputation, for having different events, and lots of people come to these events, which is really, really good. But from that, it's building those contacts, and then trying to see if people are interested in studying the Bible together and whatnot. So,
and Hirosaki, then presumably a rural Japanese place, quite unchurched. I mean, the knowledge of church and the gospel and Jesus is pretty small, I'd imagine.
Yeah, there are other churches in the city, but yeah, they're all fairly small, and
people know very little.
Yeah, but it's funny though. There is a history, like in Hirosaki, that the missionaries came a number of years back and started schools. So there's actually two remaining. There's two remaining Christian schools here. And we don't know how Christian they are anymore, but there are still sort of fundamental teachings in Christianity, which is fantastic, because when people come into church, they actually have a tiny bit of knowledge about things, which is a great starting point for us, not having to go right, back to
Especially because sometimes Japanese people can be quite suspicious of religions, other religions. So they're quite, if it's not Buddhism, their own, or Shintoism, and they can be quite suspicious of you and what you are. And thankfully here, there doesn't seem to be that kind of suspicion. Maybe because of that.
Yeah, I think because of that sort of Christian, sort of those schools and things, people are not so afraid of Christians. Yeah.
What have been some of that? Have there been any kind of highs or lows? I mean, I know it's been maybe a short term of 6 months so far, and possibly one of the significant factors, and you can say a little bit about this in a minute, it's been COVID-19, clearly. But outside of that, have there been any kind of highs of your interaction with people, or fruitfulness, or lows that we can just be praying for you about?
Yeah.
Well, I can say one high is that, so there's a girl who, we have been able to see two girls kind of coming in fresh, started coming a year ago, so 6 months before we came. And they have really grown and are now preparing for baptism. And just that, I think, has been just amazing to be so privileged to be seeing that and walking alongside of them. And then I think also challenging bit of that is to see the difficulties as well that comes along with, so they're two young, one young girl and one kind of middle-aged lady, and both of them come from non-Christian backgrounds and non-Christian families, and are the only ones in their family that are Christians. And so the challenges that they are still going through to kind of making that final step of being baptized, and that has been a high, but also
challenge.
Because some families take it very, very badly. Baptisms is sort of final sort of, I don't know what
they see it as a cut-off, once you're baptized, then you're no longer part of us, kind of thing. I mean, the family does. So one lady, and highs, there are many highs. One high as well is just to see and hear the stories from people that have become saved recently. So there's a lady at church that has been Christian. She was baptized 6 months ago, 6 months ago. And just to hear her testimony and just to see how she can witness to her family, and that's been brilliant. But for her, her family for a long time said, we don't mind, just keep going to church, but just don't get baptized. We will support you, in going, and you can take your daughter and, you know, all these things, but just don't get baptized. So it's interesting too. Yeah. That's fine.
Tell us a little bit then about the effect coronavirus has had on life and church in Japan. I remember when I was chatting with you a few months ago, you were saying actually it hadn't yet had much of an effect where you were probably in a conservative and rural environment. It just hadn't spread so much, but it seems to be having an effect globally. What's it been like for you folks?
Yeah, we've been lucky in the fact that we came from Hokkaido, which was one of the sort of hot sort of centers of the virus in Japan. And that's simply because I think it's a very, very popular place with Chinese tourists. So I think that started it. And then Tokyo, obviously being, you know, the big city it is, but no one really comes here. It's not a very popular place in Japan. So we've actually not really been affected by the virus in terms of our everyday lives very much at all. But a lot of churches in Japan have been. So a lot of churches have done the same as Saintfield Road, you know, gone online. But we're only online for 1 week. But yeah, and everyday life, things just go on as normal. Of course, there is the precautions in place, you know, the plastic sheets, you know, in front of the cash registers, and everyone wearing masks, and you know, people taking temperatures, you know, before you go into a shop. But it hasn't been such a shock here, apart from a few weeks of no toilet rolls. But apart from that was fine. But as a church plant, though, it's affected our ministry quite a bit, because the church plant usually has a number of short-termers who are working there throughout the year. So sometimes just 5 short-termers there, sometimes just up to 20. And the ministry is a very active, busy ministry, and it sort of relies on short-term help, because it has a lot of English teaching, you know, and short-termers can, you know, teach these English classes and help run events and do a lot of practical work. But because the Japanese government have closed the doors to basically every country in the world, you know, the short-termers have had to either leave, or the ones who had planned to come have not been able to come. And there's, you know, in the pipeline, there's no one really in the pipeline to come, because no one knows when the doors will be opened again. So we've sort of felt the effect of that in terms of, you know, the workload, you know, being quite heavy at times. And yeah, it can be quite stressful when you're sort of
and I think, like we were saying about language before, in all of that, you constantly as well daily feel your limitations in sharing with people. But I mean, you know that God, we know that, we trust the Holy Spirit is the one that works, so we don't have much preparation time, I guess is what I want to say, and all of that. So our Japanese as well maybe isn't improving as much as we wanted, would like it to see it. Because there's no time for studying, which we should be really continues doing,
or checking our work,
sometimes, well, the major work we get checked, the big talks, but
things like sermons and things I get checked, so I'm not preaching heresy and things, because that's always a concern.
I should probably get mine checked too. I can understand with a lot of reliance on short-termers when they're not there. You're doing a lot of work, a lot of practical stuff, a lot of operation stuff, a lot of stuff to keep ministry going, and that becomes a big burden, doesn't it, over a period of time. Guys, we want to be praying for you in that, and praying for grace and rest and strength in that. What can we be praying for? What else can we be praying for you guys in the kind of short, medium, long term, as you look ahead to because you were saying earlier when we were chatting, it's probably a year and a half left of you being in Hirosaki, and then there's home assignment, and then there's whatever God brings next. And at the moment, that probably sits. We all know that a year is a very long time for things to change now. But as far as we can see, a year and a half of being there and see what God brings next. But what can we be praying about for short, medium, long term for you guys in the moment, and as you think about what's next?
Yeah. In the short term, I guess you could be praying for. I'm not sure when this will be shown, but in September is the start of our program again, and that's when we'll sort of be sort of on the go a lot more. So you can just pray for our health and endurance, spiritual, mental, the whole shebang. That'd be fantastic. In the medium term, so obviously Rita, we're preparing, for another child, who's coming in December. We don't know if it's a he or she yet. We don't know if we will find out or not either, but that'll bring it together. It's challenges, it's changes, because obviously we're having to work on a sort of relay basis. If Brita's working, I have to take care of Jonas, and if I'm working, Brita has to take care of Jonas. So we'll have another baby in the mix there. So yeah, just in terms of preparation and wisdom on how to do or find our work-life balance, we need God's wisdom in that. And long term,
I think we are praying for, at the moment, both of us, just to be sustained, to find maybe one thing each, and maybe a friend each that we can, kind of get to know well here. There's a lot of people we get to know, and there's a lot of friends, but kind of, if we could find a friendship each that kind of can be the one that I think we've realized, we really would love a good set of friendship.
Because we have friends, but a lot of it's ministry at the same time.
It's work, kind of.
Yeah.
So that's on a long-term basis. I think of the next year and a half, we'd love to see that happen. And then another thing is, just that we can really go deep with people, because I know it's a short time if you think about it. A year and a half is not very long, but just pray that we are intentional in our relationships, and that God would really, of the people we meet and stuff. Because there's never a shortage of people, and meeting people and finding people to evangelize to is not difficult at all. But it's kind of really being close enough to God to sense His guiding, I think.
Brita, that feels like a great place to end and take that lesson and prayer, not just for you, but for all of us, that we would be intentional in our deepening of friendships and relationships that we all need, and our witnessing and our discipleship. Because whether we're in Hirosaki or here in Four Winds, Cairns Hill, there's no shortage of people, and there's no shortage of people who need to know Jesus. Folks, I want to say to you both and to Jonas, the Lord bless you and keep you, and make His face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you, and lift up the light of His countenance upon you and give you His peace. And thank you so much for sharing with us. It's great to chat with you and catch up. And hopefully that'll help folks here just continue to pray for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for talking to us and praying for us as well.